Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Aria, a local musician and educator passionate about creating music that connects, inspires, and tells a story. I specialize in pop, indie rock, and jazz. I especially really like jazz rock music, jazz pop, and I share original songs, covers, and helpful tips for fellow music lovers and aspiring songwriters. In addition to performing, I'm also studying education at my university, where I'm working towards becoming a teacher with a focus on inclusion and student well-being. Music has always been my outlet, my passion, and a huge part of how I connect with others. So today I want to help you tap into that same magic. In this video, we're going to break down how to write a song. Whether you are just starting out or you're looking to redefine your process, I'll walk you through coming up with ideas, crafting meaningful lyrics, finding your melody, and building a song structure that works for you. I'll also be sharing some creative tips I use when I feel stuck, plus how to bring emotion and storytelling into every track you write. Friends, so I'm just gonna get into it. So I was blessed with getting the chance to teach a songwriting workshop to various youth in my community at some high schools just recently. So this presentation is for that. So it's a mainly beginner course, but it's got some really good tips and tricks that I've collected over the past 8 years in my experience songwriting and working on lyric writing and structure and those things. So I'm gonna just jump right into it. Okay, so this is just a little introduction that I have for myself. Who am I? Well, my name is Aria Swanson. I'm a classically trained multi-instrumentalist. Been involved in songwriting for the past 8 years, only recently sharing my story and my music with others. Over the years, I performed at various festivals, local pubs and coffee shops, and in London, UK. I also enjoy teaching songwriting workshops, working with creative youth, and connecting with a growing community of songwriters through my YouTube channel. Of course, sharing that original music, original covers, those kinds of things. Okay, so table of contents. So I'm going to go over a brief overview of what we're going to work at today. You will have some exercises that are optional, though I do recommend doing them. So if you have a notebook, make sure you get that out and you can work along with me in the process. Next part here is chords and melody. So I'm going to talk to you about chord progressions, just kind of go over your basics of music, nothing too advanced. So if you are new to this, do not fret, do not worry. This is going to be as simple as possible. Then we're going to get into lyric structure. I'm going to discuss rhyming, cliche rhymes, slant rhymes, things like that, and how to build a lyric structure that focuses on your goals and your genre of your choosing as a musician. Then I'm going to get into writing lyrics, writing great lyrics, lyrics that connect with other people, lyrics that reflect your story that you want to tell as a musician. And our last one is purpose and emotion, one of the most important things to consider when you are creating, because purpose and emotion is essentially the fuel for your song. So first of all, I have a question for you guys. What makes a good song? So what I have here is a clear structure. Good songs typically have a verse, a chorus, a very clear structure that people follow, and it really draws the listener in. Another thing that makes up a good song is a line or a hook that draws that reader in. Listener in. So something that's really important is making sure that you incorporate catchy melodies, things like that, into your chorus. Something that I like to do if you're feeling like your verse is a little bit too bland, or you feel like your verse is too exciting, you can always switch your verse with your chorus. Oftentimes when we start writing, I know in my experience, I'll start from the very beginning of the song, but sometimes that's not the way that our brain works when we create music. Sometimes we need to start on the chorus. We need to start on that big climax of the song and work ourselves down from there. Sometimes we need to do it the other way. So it's completely up to you as a songwriter to decide what works best for you. Another thing I have here is shared experiences. You know, why does an artist like Taylor Swift have so many listeners, so many followers? And of course, she is absolutely amazing. But one of those reasons, I believe, is because her songs relate so much to personal experience, and especially personal experience with heartbreak. Heartbreak is something that everyone can understand, but because of the way that she writes, she's able to connect those shared experiences and ultimately gain understanding through her voice. Another thing that's really important is to have a solid theme or message within your song. You know, balancing out, you know, how specific and how vague you're going to be within the realm of your song. I think it's important to be specific enough that your listener can understand your unique story. However, be vague enough that your audience can relate to that story in itself. For example, if I was writing a song about heartbreak, I might not talk about every little detail of our whole breakup. I might go into, you know, a few details, maybe what kind of car they drove or what kind of music we listened to or things like that. But ultimately, I want to focus on the big picture with giving clues, giving little hints, little images into the breakup or the heartbreak that was experienced. Because that way, the audience has just enough to kind of pique their interest, to kind of be intrigued by the story, and also connect their own personal experience to your song. So that's super important when you are getting into songwriting, when you're writing your song. And last of all, it's really important to make music that makes you feel good, okay? That's like the number one thing today. Make music that makes you feel good. My goal today is to prove to you that making music is more accessible and easier than you may think. Making music is like making a sandwich. Each component is integral to the finished product. So something that makes up all of music is chord progressions. Now, you may have heard this before, you may not have heard this before. If you're clicking on my video for the first time today, I'm assuming you probably know a thing or two about music. You probably play an instrument, which is an asset to creating music. It's not necessarily, like, I would argue that you maybe don't need to know an instrument or learn an instrument right away, but later down the line, it's going to serve you really well to learn an instrument and to be able to apply your skills in a very direct way. So without going further into music theory and what typically sounds good to the ear, chord progressions make up all music. A really popular chord progression is 1-4-5-1. So I like to think of it like we have a bunch of different keys, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And there's various chord progressions within all of these keys, right? We have our scales within all of the keys, and we have corresponding chords to those scales. So it's important to know when you are creating chord progressions that you are getting across the feel and the message that you want. Now, for a lot of popular music, the 1-4-5 chord progression is used, and that is used within various different keys in music. Now, when you are creating chord progressions, it can be really simple at first to just look up a chord progression, just look up the feel that you kind of want to get across. You know, maybe you like jazz, maybe you like blues music, maybe you are really into like heavy metal. Okay, that is awesome. but make sure that your chord progression follows suit. I'll go into like writing your own chord progressions, going further into that, but the thing that you need to know is make sure that your chord progressions reflect your message and your style. The way to define chord progressions is a series of chords in a certain order and something that you enjoy that feels good to you. Okay, so I have a little bit of an exercise for you. So grab your instrument, use your voice, use your piano, guitar, anything you want, and go ahead and try this exercise. So here I have the key of C. I have 1, 5, 4, 6. So C, G, A minor, F. And what I want you to do is I want you to play these chords over and over again and see how many popular songs you can hear. How many popular songs can you hear within those chords? What kind of melodies can you come up with? And what kind of melodies do you recognize within that chord progression in the key of C? After you guys are done that, go ahead and go to the key of G and play those same chord progressions. If you're feeling ambitious, go ahead and play the chord progression 1, 5, 4, 6 in every single key. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And see what happens. See how many songs you can recognize. I believe for the key of C, Country Roads comes to mind. In the key of C, in the key of G, I believe Complicated by Avril Lavigne. There's lots of good songs and popular songs that use these very basic chord progressions just in various keys. So give that a try and explore that. Explore if you can make any connections between various songs, various melodies. I want you guys to see that these very famous, very talented musicians often rely on very simple chord progressions to be able to create. Okay, now we are on to lyric structure. So what are common structures and how do we create lyrics? So when I first started making music, I very much used basic verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, theme for all of my music. And that's a very basic theme, or a very basic structure that you can use when you're starting out. Absolutely, give that a try. It makes up a lot of very popular songs and things like that. So it's very important to, try something that you know when you're first starting out. Now, something that's also important is to consider why you would use one structure over another. So I really like Joni Mitchell's style of writing. Not only does she have really cool tunings on her guitar, but she is very unique in making her songs very story-based. If she starts out in Both Sides Now describing clouds, describing things like that, and by the end we get to the last verse and she describes how life has changed and throughout her lifetime, what life means to her now. And I love her approach there because she's starting out with something very vague, like looking at the clouds, something very, very tangible, but yet vague. And when we go through her song verse by verse, she really opens that scope up and she alludes to her own feelings by the end. So she doesn't, start off saying, oh, life has changed, look at all these strange things that I've realized over the years. She starts with something as simple as the clouds. And over time, we get to a conclusion that she's made about life. Very, very cool. I also like that she is focused on these verse-based structures. So that might be something that you want to bring into your own writing journey of making verse-based structures. If you are someone that has maybe a poetry background or a writing background, if you're like me, like I'm also an English student, so I love to tell stories. I have a gazillion stories in my head, and I like to, have that story change over time. Maybe you want to use more verse-based lyric structures because that is going to be the best thing to get your story across. Remember to always consider as well what feels best to you. So if you've grown up maybe hearing a lot of like popular music, maybe that verse, chorus, bridge, chorus structure, if that feels natural to you, go for it. Maybe that is what you need to start out and to convey your emotions and your story to your listeners. So right here, I have, why do we use templates? So templates, when you're using lyric structures for the first time, can be really helpful. So this first template, very straightforward. Template number 1. Template number 2, again, pretty straightforward, although this is really important. We also have an intro here and a pre-chorus. It also includes drums, bass, high notes, and it kind of guides you on where to include certain elements to your song. So things like drums may be a really good thing to add in the beginning of your song to kind of hook your reader in. Hook your listener in. I keep saying reader. Oh. Okay. Drums, things like that can be so useful to hooking your listener in. It's so important to use certain elements to your music to make sure that your listener is engaged. So we have other templates here. Feel free to screenshot that. Feel free to look online. I got that from a local site here. Just underneath, you can find the site, so you guys can download any more templates that you wish to use. But they're a really good site, and they include a lot of really, really helpful templates, especially if you're just starting out. Okay, now we're going to talk about writing great lyrics. What makes up relatable and good lyrics? Okay, so I believe that imagery is something that makes up great lyrics. So I have an example here. One of my favorite artists is Sammy Ray and the Friends. I love them so much. They are so cool. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Sammy in the fall. Show you guys a little photo there. Super exciting. It was so cool. She's really down to earth, and I love the message that she's building and this community that she's building for queer people across the world, really, and making people feel seen and heard in a really cool, loving, friendship-oriented space. So I really like her songs, and that's why I'm using one of her examples. The thing that I also like about Sammy Ray and the Friends is they are so good at building imagery in their music. So in their first stanza here, we have smoky walls, dusty halls, no one calls. If you know this one. Smoky walls, dusty halls, no one calls, and all the windows are dying. It's Talk It Up from Sammy Ray and the Friends. But this first stanza is really good because she's building this room that we're in. You know, smoky walls, dusty halls. These are things that kind of play on our five senses. And all the window plants are dying. Again, I can kind of see that in my mind. Then when we go on to the second stanza, then we dive into the purpose for being in this room. What is this person doing here? and kind of explaining a little bit about where this person might go from here. I really like that she's not rhyming every single line as well, which is something that people debate on if you should or shouldn't do. But she's not using those cliche rhymes. She's straight to the point. You know, we're talking about what this person is doing here. You know, she's sleeping in the bed she's made, reading books about self-help, working late on Saturdays. This person is growing as a person. And that's something that I really like about this song. So if you guys want to do a little exercise here, feel free to. I have put in here to use a verse chorus based lyric structure. What I want you guys to do is to kind of copy this format that is included. So write 2 stanzas. The first stanza, use your own personal experience and write about going to a new place for the first time. What were maybe some of the feelings you were feeling, some of the emotions, some of the maybe fears you were experiencing. Maybe excitement was the biggest thing of that day. So write about your 5 senses in your first stanza and really think about that. Don't give us too much detail, but write about those 5 senses. And then going on to that second stanza, kind of bring the scope in a little bit. Tell us more about the story of this person. Maybe you're talking about yourself or a friend in this new space, and discuss how that person got there. Okay, so on to, do you dislike or like these lyrics? So in this purple box here, I have an example of cliche lyrics. Hey, have I told you lately? I think about you, baby. And I think just maybe you're the one I want. I'm cringing at myself. So these aren't bad, right? It's not bad. But these lyrics are cliche and they rhyme after every single line. And this is something that I like to avoid in my own writing because, of course, it's more predictable for the listener. And I like to avoid that when I create music, just because we don't want predictable lyrics. I like to avoid these kind of lyric schemes just because I find them really predictable. You know, like if I covered this word baby and I said, hey, have I told you lately? I think about you, baby. You could probably predict what I was going to say. And it can be good to kind of catch the listener off guard, to, you know, put in some of those, like maybe a slant rhyme or some rhymes that they may not expect. So on the right-hand side here, on the yellow part, I have example of non-cliche lyrics. So stained on a page that doesn't exist, a heart yearns for what it doesn't have. Empty pockets, empty hands. So a slant rhyme are 2 words that rhyme. So a slant rhyme is words that sound good together, that sound like they rhyme, but they don't. And that can be nice because it, again, can kind of catch the listener off guard and really make a nice rhyme structure. So the example of the slant rhyme in this lyric, in this stanza here, would be have and hands. Again, they don't rhyme, but they are a slant rhyme, and it is a little bit unusual, a little bit fun, and it's nice to add that in there. So first and last lines are the most powerful, so ensure that you emphasize them when you are creating your lyrics. Okay. And now we have another example just of our 5 senses when we are creating. I really like this example here. So we have open roads, not a soul around. We have that visual, right? Not a soul around, open roads. You can visualize that. Loud roads and silence of this town. So you can kind of hear that, right? You can hear. Even though, you know, we're talking about something like silence and loud winds, they kind of contrast each other. And that's really cool and really important to incorporate when you are writing. Nothing but chills running down my spine. Again, that's something you can feel in your body. It grounds you as a listener, and you can understand that. So often songwriters will write lyrics that resonate with their audience through personal experience as well. Now, I've kind of briefly touched on this, but it's important to connect to your audience through personal experience because you automatically have a connection with the listener. And the trick is to be specific yet vague with your writing. Something that comes into my mind is some of Billie Eilish's performances and interviews after her performances. And I love her like breakdowns of her own lyrics and structures and things like that she does. And what's really cool about that is she never goes into full detail about what her song is about. You know, she provides just enough information that, you know, she's talking about her experience and her reader or her listeners can kind of understand what she's saying, you know, understand the message that she's getting across, whether it's jealousy, betrayal, heartbreak, confusion, all those deep, rich emotions. But she doesn't tell her full story about the song, which is really important if you want to keep your reader, if you want to keep your listener engaged. It is really important to find that balance and find what works for you as an individual. Okay, now on to emotion and purpose. So emotion and purpose act as the fuel for your song, like I said earlier. Lyrics can be isolated and almost seen as poetry. So I really like to see it as poetry as well when I'm writing. When you're focusing on lyrics, it can be helpful to treat lyrics like writing poetry. So, what kind of literary devices can you use? Metaphors, similes, repetition, imagery, alliteration, etc. And can I switch out the poetic form or rhyming schemes? Lots of people will rhyme the second and the fourth line, or the first and the third line. So maybe it would be helpful to switch that up throughout your song and kind of consider the impact of that. I really, really like this example by Hozier. His song Cherry Wine is incredible. And I just love the imagery that this provides. So we have, her eyes and words are so icy, oh, but she burns, like rum on the fire. Again, we have that simile there, that metaphor. Hot and fast, as angry as she can be, I walk my days on a wire. So powerful, so intense with its imagery. He just does a really, really good job of this. So it can be helpful to consider composers and songwriters that do a really good job of imagery and look at some of the things that they do. What kind of literary devices do they include? And how can you include that? How can you include that into your song as well? Emotion and purpose. So what are some ways to incorporate emotion? Be honest. Convey your emotions and listen to your intuition about your lyrics. Try explaining the feeling without directly naming it. Sometimes, always really, it can be helpful to explain through metaphors, briefly touch on emotions, but I would never be in a song and say, oh, I'm sad. I would say, oh, there is an emptiness that's overcoming me, or there is a loneliness that fills up this room. So it can be really helpful to be a little bit indirect with your audience at times. And provide clues for your audience about the story. Again, so many writers do a really, really good job of this. So it can be helpful to listen to some of your favorite artists and kind of identify what are the clues that they tell in their stories. And ways to guide your songs by your purpose of your song. Consider the message that you want to convey. So all songs have messages. You just really need to think about what needs to be conveyed in your song. For example, if your style of writing is based in storytelling, your lyrics should reflect that. And consider what the characters were feeling. If your song is about someone you know or an experience that you had, make sure that you include those feelings because they're integral to having an understanding and having your listener connect to those lyrics. Again, a lot of information has been given in this presentation, but if you want to practice it, which you should be practicing every single day using your songwriting skills. But if you want to take this into practice, which I would definitely recommend, I have a few options here for writing your own song during this workshop. So the first one is write your own third verse to a song that already exists. That way you can work with a melody and focus on the impact of your lyrics. Remember to incorporate some of the songwriting elements that I've listed today. And write your own melody and lyrics to some guitar chords or some chord progressions that you are playing. That would be your option 2. Or hum your own melody first and then write your lyrics to the melody. You can also use a backing track that I've included here in case you are someone who is new to writing music, maybe doesn't have any instruments at home or doesn't know how to play any instruments. So you are welcome to use a backing track in the meantime and kind of explore that. And remember to ask questions. We don't grow as musicians if we don't fail, if we don't mess up, if we don't ask questions, if we don't, connect with other artists. The most important thing is to practice, and to know that failing and failure is a normal part of the learning process. And think about, what do you want to write about? What do you want to convey? What makes you feel good? And most of all, have fun. This is meant to be a fun, exciting exercise to convey what you want to in your own song. That's so exciting. Okay, and here's a quick challenge for you to do in the next week. So I challenge you, next time you hear a song that you like, write down a line or two and consider why it resonates with you. Does it include certain literary devices like metaphors or similes? Does it include a certain amount of syllables? Does it connect to personal experience through a specific yet vague method? Think about that. And here are your last minute tips. My first tip, record everything, because if you don't, you'll forget it. Apps like Chord are really good for making up chord progressions. GarageBand for just basic recording. I use Logic Pro X for my recording, and I think it was really worth the upgrade. I got the student bundle, which was excellent, and now I use that to do all my kind of recordings and things like that. Although I still refer back to GarageBand because it's so easy to just pick up my phone, record my little melody that I came up with, or record my guitar parts that I like, and I just have that right on my phone. Another great thing to use is voice memos. You can capture whatever you need and put that directly onto Logic Pro if you're interested, or just use your voice memos if you're just trying to get a basic, recording or understanding of your lyrics and melody. My second tip is don't be afraid to blend genres or styles that you like. follow your intuition on what should be incorporated in your song. Do not be pushed around by people that are saying, oh, you know, I think that you should stick to this or you should stick to that. Unless these people know you very well and they have, you know, really good, solid advice, it's important to listen to your intuition with this. What do you feel is best? Also, my third tip is there's no such thing as a bad song. Now, hear me out. There are people that do not have technique, they're not trained, that create, and honestly, not the greatest. However, I always like to think that people are on their journey of learning and creating, and that there are songs that resonate with us, and then there are songs that don't. And on your journey creating music, it's important to recognize that, just like me, I'm learning every single day. You know, there are songs that I have that are complete shit, and there are songs that I have that I feel good about. And then there are songs that are kind of in between that I'm like, yeah, I need to work at this, I need to work at that. We have so much room to grow as musicians. There's so much we could be doing. But the reality of it is, don't beat yourself up. Your songs are not bad. They are growing, and you know, sometimes we need to work a little bit harder on trying to resonate with our audience. So cut yourself some slack. You need time, and everything will figure itself out in the end. Okay, friends, thank you for listening. If you have any questions or comments for me, please feel free to drop them in the comment section below. Was this helpful for you? Did you enjoy anything most about the workshop? Is there anything you would focus on or do differently? Please let me know. I've also included my email here if you have any further questions or you want to share some of your work with me. I'd love to hear from you guys and connect with you on a more personal basis. I've also included my Instagram and my YouTube, but obviously you're on my YouTube here, which is super cool. Okay, friends, so that's a wrap on today's video. I hope this gave you a solid starting point and some inspiration for writing your own song. Remember, songwriting is a personal journey. There's no perfect way to do it. What matters most is you're expressing something real and authentic to you. Whether you're writing your first song or your 50th, keep experimenting, keep feeling, and most importantly, keep creating. Don't be afraid to write something messy, emotional, or totally outside of your comfort zone. That's often where the best songs and best works of art come from. So if you found this helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and drop a comment below sharing your own songwriting tips or questions. I would love to hear from you guys. It's so cool to have a community like this, and it's so cool to connect with so many of you guys. And if you end up writing a song using any of these ideas, tag me or share it in the comments. I'd be so excited to check it out and connect with you. All right, folks, thanks for hanging out with me today. Keep making music, and I will see you in the next video.